He's, and so I welcome you all to our Colorado Forest Health Council Legislative Committee meeting. And we have some wonderful presenters and important presentation today. And I call this meeting to order. If Courtney, if you wouldn't mind doing roll call, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Commissioner. Samantha Albert.
Present.
Hi, Samantha. Christy Belton.
I'm here. Morning.
Good morning, Christy. Katie McGrath Novak. Pat Dorsey.
Here.
Good morning, Pat. Director McCombs or designee. Hi, James. I see Katie just joined us as well. Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally.
Present.
Morning, Commissioner. Mark Morgan.
Present.
Good morning. Julie Stensel. Councilman Sylvan Whiteskunk. Commissioner Medina. I think I saw you. Hello, Commissioner.
Present.
Okay, wonderful. We do have quorum established.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Thank you, everyone. Oh, and Director McCombs just joined as well.
Okay, great. Yes, and there's quite a few other council members here. Yes, I see Director Morgan, Director McCombs, Ethan Bushels, and I will make note of all the other council members present as well. Scott Jones.
Great. Welcome, everyone. We're glad you're here today. I think this is an important conversation and important presentation. So let's get some business taken care of. Before we start on our presentation, we have the minutes that are presented. Does anyone have any changes, additions, or concerns about the minutes? If not, I would welcome a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I so move.
I'll
Thank
second.
you. Thank you so much. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, if you just raise your hand and signal with an aye. Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Well, let's move on to our next important presentation. I want to welcome our guest speakers, Director Dan Gibbs and Director. I'm trying to see, are they all here? Courtney, I'm sorry. I think you said they were here. I'm
Yes.
looking for them. Mr. Morgan, I appreciate everyone being here today. And I think we'll, I don't know, Courtney, if you want to do an introduction about what we're presenting today, do you have that real quick? Or should I just have Director Gibbs start out? That would be great. Director Gibbs, I would welcome you to kind of start the presentation and share what we're here to listen to today. I'm really excited to hear about this. Thank you for being here. And Mr. Morgan as well.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Really happy to be with you all today. Director Morgan and I are just kind of pitch it. We'll both kind of jump in here and there to give you an overview of items that we think are really important for you all to be aware of. Mike, maybe I'll just give like a really high overview of the group. You know, this particular commission was established under the bipartisan infrastructure law. And there were about 50 of us that were selected from all over the country with a really broad range of expertise. So you had like Mike, you know, representing state fire chiefs. I was representing state DNR and state foresters around the state. There were folks that represented the insurance company, folks that represented different aspects of, I would say water management, and you get the picture, you know, quite broad. We were given about a year to come together to make recommendations to Congress. And so the commission is actually called the Wildland Fire Mitigation and Management Commission. We had facilitators that help move the conversations along. There were a lot of different subgroups. Mike and I both participate in a bunch of different subgroups. At the end of the day, we were able to come up with a 340-page report. I think Courtney sent that around with 148 consensus recommendations. And, given, I would say, the political climate, having Republicans, Democrats, Green Party, Libertarians, everyone come together to focus on recommendations, to have it consensus based, to have 148, I think is really, truly amazing. There were 7 overarching themes, and maybe I will maybe turn it over to Mike. I don't know if you want to cover maybe those 7 arching themes or other perspectives too.
Oops, I'm hitting the wrong buttons, but thanks, Director Gibbs. Yeah, I think just building on what Director Gibbs said, the thing that was very unique about this group is as Dan said, is there was 50 people, and what was really cool about it was that we had air quality, we had utility providers. It was the most diverse group I think that has ever been assembled to really look at the overall the problem, if you will, which I think was really exciting. I mean, I know I learned things that I probably never really wanted to know, maybe perhaps about the problem, because I was forced to look at things through a different lens and hear different perspectives, which I think, we tend to, I think as, all of us have this tendency to align ourselves with like-minded people that think the way I do and would make the similar types of decisions. And yet this forced us into a group where we had to listen to things from different perspectives that we wouldn't normally sit down with EPA and talk about, the bad aspects of smoke or the good aspects of smoke, and really where we had to work through those details. And while there's a lot of work to be done, there's a lot of really good themes. And I think the other thing I wanted to add is that this report was the charge of the commission was to make recommendations to Congress, and which was kind of an interesting perspective, because as we started getting into that, we really realized that all disasters, whether that's pre-fire, post-fire, during fire, those all begin and end local. And so what can Congress do to better support the decision-making process at the ground level, where Congress doesn't necessarily have the authority to dictate, right? So there are some very common things about that. First of all, this urgent new approach that we can't keep doing the same things over and over and expecting different outcomes. We have to take a more holistic approach. For decades, we've had conversations about, is it fuels management or is it suppression? And it's really an and then you get into all of these other things about, what can we do pre-fire? What can we do during fire? What can we do post-fire? How can we do more work across different boundaries? Which really got us into the next theme of, collaboration, and really saying that there's been too many groups working in a vacuum, and we need to pull all of the groups together, even though we're not always like-minded, and we need to hear those voices and be more collaborative in everything that we do, whether it's preparing for the fire, planning for mitigation, or recovery, and that we're all in the same thing together. Being proactive instead of reactive was a common theme, is that we tend to wait for the fire to get big and then think about what we should be doing, and we should be more proactive with how we do that. A lot of themes around enabling, that in some of the presentation, when you look at the report, you'll see that it talks about fire being the threat, but it also talks about fire being the tool, one of the most beneficial tools to get us out of the crisis that we're actually in. The next theme that was really realized, and won't be any secret to this group, is that we don't have a workforce, the number of people we need, or or people with the right skills or expertise to do the broad aspect of things that are going to have to be done to address this problem as a whole. Then there was also a lot of conversations around how do we modernize what we do? How can technology, fire environment centers or fire intelligence centers, or how do we plan all of that out using technologies, drones, satellites, and pre-planning some of this, and being more proactive with that, and then investing in the resilience that we all know that if we're reactive and we let the fires continue to occur at the pace they're occurring now, that we're going to be spending more. And while it's expensive to change that curve, in the long run, we're going to have to spend money to actually start saving money in the long run. And then I think my last comment about the themes was a lot of conversations around how we tend to think in 2 to 3 to 5 year strategies, and we really need to be thinking more about 50-year strategies. That this is a long haul to get us out of this crisis, and I think a lot of the policymakers tend to think about, well, if we invest in this year, we'll move the needle. Well, if we don't have continual investments, then we're not really going to make the big difference that we're going to have to make over the long haul. So, Dan, you want to take the next one? Oh, you're on mute.
Okay. For the arching themes, I'm trying to think, which one did you leave off on?
Well, I think if we kind of got into some more of the maybe kind of the slides of recommendations.
Okay, perfect. So all these like 7 themes are really I would say interrelated in so many ways. And so they shouldn't be looked at as like a vacuum more or less of just like separately, but it's all kind of interchangeable. But we thought it'd be important for us to kind of like cover some of the highlights. Again, there's 148 different highlights, and Mike and I are going to kind of go through and talk about a few different ones. One on the list that was really important, we thought, for Colorado was post-fire. And I'll just read a quote here that was from the report. This dispersed and decentralized system, overlapping areas of responsibility, and incredible approach has created conditions where programs to support post-wildfire flooding and debris flow risk mitigation are often reacted instead of proactive. And so there's a recommendation in here, number 777. It's to increase authorizations and appropriations for watershed rehabilitation program, so post-fire. So, Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally, all too well in your neck of the woods, with the East Troublesome Fire and Cameron Peak Fire, especially, the impacts to watersheds, after fires. And so, so there's a recommendation in there to, make sure that, funding for not only like proactive management and also during fires, but also the post-fire impacts of the millions of dollars that it costs for water providers to deal with post-fire. So specifically, one of the recommendations, it's number 77. So it would read that the Joint Chiefs Landscape Restoration Partnership should be authorized to incorporate post-fire preparedness and recovery efforts and funded accordingly. So a lot of these Joint Chiefs landscape projects are really, I would say at the mitigation level. So before there's any, wildfires and so forth. So they were making recommendations that these funds should also be used for some post-fire activity. Another one is number 75. This is to authorize and fund the interdisciplinary cross-jurisdictional assessment of burn areas. So I'll just read a little bullet point from this. So it says, just as responders work across various jurisdictions to protect public and private lands in a unified way during wildfires, post-fire assessments should be inclusive efforts designed to evaluate and protect values at risk, regardless of jurisdiction. So should also allow action for federal lands that protects non-federal values at risk. So again, kind of working collaboratively that these funds should be able to use in a more, nimble way. Mike, you want to go over maybe some of the public health stuff? Thanks.
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, we had EPA in the room, and it was a lot of really good conversations around that. There's really no such thing as good smoke. I mean, sometimes we refer to as good smoke and bad smoke, but there's really no such thing as good smoke. But what can we do to mitigate smoke? Because we're going to have smoke. So there's smoke that's less bad than others, using my own language of that. So what are we doing, and what's the science behind preparing communities for the smoke that's inevitably going to occur, knowing that prescribed fire puts smoke in the air that is less bad than smoke from an urban interface event where you're burning 100 homes, and so there's a lot of conversations around investing in a nationally consistent smoke monitoring and alert system. To provide consistent real-time information forecasts on air quality impacts, to educate the public about that inevitably we're going to have smoke. How do we learn to mitigate, and learn to live with it more than what we have in the past? That was recommendation number 44. Moving on to some other things related to health. Recommendation 35 was authorize and incentivize flood mitigation, water quality, and source water protection projects, and existing wildfire mitigation and recovery programs, protecting community water supplies. And it was, again, what was a really interesting conversations, and the lack of investment and really probably lack of understanding from the air quality world, if you will, and the mitigation and or response world, to really force us into understanding the work that needs to continue to be done and the investments that need to be done in order to apply fire to the landscape in the right way, at the right time, right place, right conditions, and right resources. So landscapes, you want to hit that one, Dan?
Yeah, sure. Landscapes was definitely one of the larger, I would say, like subcomponents of some of our work. Recognizing that for us to really get large meaningful work done, we need to look at, a landscape level. And so one of the recommendations that we had for landscapes was number 24. And this is one that's like really near and dear to my heart. But it's increase the flexibility of federal funds to move across boundaries. And you've all heard me say this 1,000 times, wildfires don't know the difference between federal, state, private, or tribal lands. And we need to have management strategies that really reflect that. And so, having federal funds that can be used, in this patchwork quilt environment that we especially have in Colorado and throughout the West, I think it's very important, to say the least. So recommendation is to increase flexibility of federal funds to move across boundaries, really create and expand authorizations and appropriations to allow for greater use of funds across jurisdictional lines. One specific recommendation regarding this is Congress should commission the Government Accounting Office, the GAO, to review existing programs, rules, and authorities that enable or inhibit cross-boundary work. And, that's something that some of these recommendations, I think Congress will take a hard look at, maybe introducing some bills. Some of these recommendations in part can be done administratively. So I think this is, really important. Just across the street from me, I have multiple different ownership of boundaries, and we need to do more, work on that. Another key component of landscapes is recognizing the good work and kind of the foundations that Forest Health Collaboratives provide to helping get projects off the ground. So we all know that Forest Health Collaboratives sometimes provide funding, sometimes technical assistance. But I've personally, and we've all seen, Forest Health Collaboratives, bring diverse groups together to really zero in on certain landscapes to get that buy-in that's critically important to get done. Yeah, I can't tell you how often, at least for me, I'm sure for Mike too, it's kind of like, how much money do you need to get, something done? But I think folks really need to understand it takes some time, and you need to like get people to have local buy-in to support certain projects. And so if the feds could take more of a meaningful role in helping to direct potentially funds to support collaboratives, I think that'd be a real positive step in the right direction. So I was really, really excited that this recommendation came out, and I think everyone just kind of recognized the great work that Forest Health Collaboratives bring to the table to help communities be more resilient. Mike, you want to maybe do workforce?
Sure, I can jump on that. I wanted to also just kind of put an emphasis on what Dan just said. One of the things that I think everybody realized, that if we're going to be successful, as I kind of mentioned early on, it has to start at the ground level. When we have, most of the meetings, I'm sure you all see this too, when you go to these meetings and you walk into the room and you have, a huge presence of federal, maybe a few state, and one or two locals. It's hard to get that trust and that collaboration, right? To build these types of things out. And this is, what Dan was just talking about, is a recognition of that, is to go, if we can flip that around where you've got 30 locals in the room and one or two state and federal people, that's when we're going to see success. And so how do we invest in that? And then which kind of builds into, the next thing of workforce, and that, and the quote from Workforce is, comprehensive, expanded, and sustainable workforce is the cornerstone of our ability to change our future. And without robust workforce, many of the Commission's recommendations become less feasible and may in fact become impossible. If we don't have the boots on the ground, from the people to do the education work up front, to rally the locals, if you will, and help to coordinate and support that, the people to do the mechanical work on the ground that needs to be done, and the planning, the people that need to be doing the prescribed fire work with the right skill set, the responders, because we will never completely eliminate the need to respond to fires, the workforce it takes to recover from fires, and being able to educate folks that, that it can, as Dan said, work across boundaries throughout all of that entire process. And the theme that we all know, and as Dan said, and we've all heard, is, fire does not know boundaries, but everything we do planning for or responding to or recovering from recognizes boundaries. And we've got to get that mentality out, and establish the workforce to do that. There's some specific recommendations in here. One, the increase the wages and benefits for the federal workforce. That, of course, everybody's aware that, there was a one-time bonus and pay raise for federal firefighters. And that needs to continue if we're going to recruit and retain those folks. Another theme that was in there, remember at 56, a lot of conversations around, there was this focus on Congress and the federal wildland firefighters, and that depending on who you talk to, that number is about 25,000-ish firefighters across the country. When you look at state and local governments, you're talking about 1.2, 1.3 million firefighters. So the workforce expansion is, how do we recognize that always the 1,200-pound gorilla is local governments. That's where the resources are at. And recommendation number 56 is about improved training and coordination between the structural fire departments and the wildland fire management agencies. We have very solid relationships here in Colorado, but they still need development, and kind of going with the bigger theme of, that we've talked about, is that we have a land management issue, but we also have a public safety crisis. And we need to merge those workforces and better train and equip them so they can collaborate more and respond together in a better way. There was a lot of conversations included in this, and several other of the themes that that public safety voice needs to be present at the table. Our DOI partners, Department of Interior, our USDA partners at the Forest Service have done tremendous work, but the public safety lens is different, and that's not their area of expertise. They'll be the first ones to tell you that. And so we need to elevate the U.S. Fire Administration to be an equal voice in that collaboration to coordinate the training and coordination of the 1.2 million workforce in state and local government. You want to talk about communities, Dan?
Yeah, sure. Let me read a quote about communities because I think this is really good. Wildfire is no longer, if it ever was, an issue simply of land management. Rather, the crisis has a different nexus with emergency management, public health, and land management. Solutions must be comprehensive and encompass all of society in scope and scale in order to change our relationship with fire, restore ecosystems, and protect communities. One of the recommendations, recognizing some of the issues that we hear in this particular committee, like, hey, what grants available for this or that, or who has within the State Forest Service, what grants are there, what grants are in the DNR, what grants are in Division of Fire Prevention Control, what are the federal grants, and so forth, blah blah blah. But having some more establishment of an interagency coordinating partnership to create a community wildfire risk reduction program. So establish an interagency coordinating partnership with like the U.S. Forest Service, FEMA, NIST, all different partners, create an umbrella structure for all federal community wildfire risk reduction programs modeled on the 1977 National Earthquake Hazard Reduction Act. So a suite of approaches to risk reduction that could be included within this like encompassing way to find information on how to apply for this and that would be information on financial incentives, subsidies, support for code and standard adoption, support for non-agency partners, research and science. So again, kind of like one-stop shop that folks can go to for all different types of information to help make communities, more resilient. And then also some other recommendations would be to better coordinate, unify, and expand the use of science and technology. So recommendations for that include development of an interagency joint office for decision and support, improve wildfire science coordination, improve optimization of research, improve community decision-making. So that is all, a huge part of, moving things forward. Mike, you want to maybe cover response coordination?
Sure. One of the quotes from response coordination was governance systems and structures must be more inclusive of non-federal entities and must involve greater collaboration, which kind of ties into that theme. And the response coordination, I think, was important to note was that while there was a lot of conversations about response to an event when it occurs and how to better do that, there was also a lot of themes around how do we coordinate response to prescribed fire work, to recovery work. And so it was a much more holistic approach about response coordination, not just what we would think about, the traditional emergency response. It was more about coordination of resources and using, being more collaborative with local, with non-NGOs, et cetera, tribes, bringing everybody to the table about bringing all those resources together to mobilize it. Cohesive strategy came up as well, and that there was one of the things specifically charged to the commission was to relook at the cohesive strategy. does it still apply? That was again reaffirmed that is still the right model. Using the cohesive strategy is still the right model to do that. But then and that was one of the first groups that worked with the commission to reinforce what that meant, and then to talk about the different themes about how do we better support all three legs of the stool, if you will, moving forward. So we're going to talk a little bit about appropriations, Dan.
Yeah, appropriations. Let me read a quote here. Congressional appropriations heavily favor wildfire response over proactive activities such as retrofitting structures to resist ignition, thinning vegetation near communities, or managing forests and grasslands, including through the application of beneficial fire to mitigate wildfire risk. So appropriation, I think this particular group that we're involved with, recognize that this is really in most parts a once in a lifetime opportunity of federal funding that will be coming to especially Western states, but that we need to continue to have funding so that folks like Mr. Morgan in the timber industry and others can really plan when they're buying a timber harvester that costs close to $1 million, what is that long-term sustainable funding and kind of mitigation approach look like moving forward if you're making investments. So everyone recognize that we need to continue to urge Congress to be proactive with making sure there's long-term funding available, that we explored some long-term funding like they do for community development block grants that they have. It's like 5-year funding streams. I know in a lot of cases in education, sometimes there's like a block of funding, long-term funding. So what to expect, moving forward. So everyone was very supportive of, more funding, but not just like a lump sum, here you go, but just like continuous funding that we can all plan for. So I thought that was really positive.
So I'm going to pause you, Director Gibbs. I know you needed to go at 9:00. And I know that maybe we have some questions, but maybe Director Morgan can answer those, or we can, as a committee, submit some questions that we can have maybe asked later. But I just wanted to check in with you if you needed to still leave at 9:00. And I just really appreciate you both being here today and reading some of those quotes from that report. It's been very, very fascinating and very exciting to hear some of these recommendations. I'll let what does your time frame look like for now?
Yeah, thanks so much. I do have to run. I think Mike can stay just a little bit longer, but feel free to follow up with me on a call or email. Contact Courtney as well. But I'm sure Mike will say too. We participated for I'd say over a year on this, but we're still having meetings. We just actually had a meeting yesterday, and Mike is actually continues to be in a leadership role with this moving forward. So I think it's exciting that we're not just like, here's a report and we're done, but we're still on the hook to give advice and be involved. But Mike, I'll let you take it over from here. But it's really a great honor to serve with Mike and the other Coloradans too. We had a really great team of folks, and it was just really an honor to learn from everyone and be a part of this great team.
Thank you, Director Gibson, and just want to thank you again for your service on this and being here today. Just really proud of our Colorado leadership and representation at a federal level. So thank you very much, and happy holidays.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan, and we'll circle up later. But I've got about another 15 minutes, but I'll kind of wrap it up for any Q&A. I know that Courtney sent the report out, and if you look in the appendix in the back, it has, reading the 300-page document. I know that can be a little hefty sometimes, but if you go to the appendix in the back, the recommendations are listed, and then you can kind of cross-reference to get more information about, what is there. I think one of the things that I thought was really good about Colorado, if you will, is that many things throughout the report. They kind of talked about what we are doing or what we're working on doing in Colorado as being kind of the efforts that are underway. I mean, we got a lot of work to do, no doubt about it, but to recognize that we have a fire commission, a forest health advisory committee. We have committees that are working collaboratively to do cross-boundary work in the different areas, and the different programs that are being instituted with COSWAP or enhanced state assistance, or the intelligence center we're building out in a fire dispatch center, and all of the things that Colorado's working on were kind of validated as going, hey, those are things that we can learn from and we should continue to invest in. And so with that, I guess next steps too, is Dan kind of hit on that. The commission by statute is in place until March for 180 days after publication of the report. So the end of March, the commission will cease to exist. I will say there's probably a little bit of angst around that in that, the report came out the end of September. And of course, we all know that on October 7th, we had the Israel Gaza event hit, and that kind of shook up DC, obviously, and everybody. And then, of course, we had a period of time, without having a Speaker of the House, and not getting too far into the weeds. I'm not sure that the commission is feeling really confident that Congress is ready to pick up with this and take action, right? And we have this defined amount of time that the commission actually exists. So we're having a lot of conversations. As Dan mentioned, we had a meeting yesterday. We are talking about what does it look like after the commission expires, and how do we, there's so much work in here, how do we continue to champion that effort? The commission appointed, there's 3 chairs that by statute, there's USDA, Department of Interior, and U.S. Fire Administrator are the chairs of the group through the commission itself. At the end there in our last meeting in October, they appointed 4 additional folks from the commission to be a broader steering committee. That includes Casey from Nevada. It has David Sampson, who is with the insurance industry. It has myself, and I'm drawing a blank on the 4th one for some reason. But anyway, there's 7 folks that are kind of driving that, and we're trying to figure out the framework to continue this, because with 148 recommendations that are interwoven, we know that we won't get all 148. I mean, it's going to take time to get there. As we kind of started the conversation with, there are very interwoven. We can't just cherry pick 1 or 2 and think we're going to make a big impact. We need to address all of these things. So there's a lot of talk about, there's been a lot of groups that have said, we have an interest, we'll pick up the report and run with it. And I think the commission itself has, that's kind of where some of the angst is to go, well, if we have one group that picks up the report and then starts cherry picking the things that are important to that particular group and leaving out the things that are important to others, then we're going to miss the mark. So we're talking about some type of longer term effort with some sideboards that the report can't change. The body of the report remains the same. There's a lot of interest from some philanthropy organizations in funding some staff and some different things to continue to move the effort forward. But that is still all a work in progress. So, Commissioner, I will stop there and try to answer any questions that anybody might have at this point.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Morgan. And really a lot of information. I appreciate you sharing kind of next steps, and I'm sad to hear the commission's kind of wrapping up before you can see things kind of seen through the steering committee. Sounds promising. Let us know if we can advocate in any way. This is me speaking individually. If we can advocate to kind of make sure we have a great plan, but now we have to do something. And so I want to just say, if we don't get through all the questions, because we have a couple other items we want to respect Director Morgan's time. Certainly we can, at the end, kind of send questions to Courtney if we have more questions after this. But I see Director McCombs has his hand raised.
You're on mute there, Matt. I can't hear you.
Well, while we're waiting for Director McCombs to work with this audio, I have a quick question. I'm really thrilled to hear about local governments and local agencies, kind of that focus. You know, here in Larimer County, we only have 3 paid fire departments. We have several volunteer fire departments, which are probably local residents who are trained, but they're aging and they're retiring. We just lost the Glen Haven fire chief went through the Cameron Peak fire and some of the flooding is retiring. So I just wondering, was that kind of taken in consideration? A lot of these communities have just volunteers that are working with little budgets and little training, but big hearts.
Yes, that was a ton of the conversation. And as I mentioned earlier, there was a lot of, in the room initially, there's a lot of conversations around that 25,000 federal wildland firefighter workforce. And when we got into workforce as a whole, you say, well, there's about 1.3 million in local government and state government, of which, depending on where you're at, 65 to 75% of those are volunteer. So what are we doing about that workforce? Because that's, again, all emergencies starting in local. And so there was a lot of conversations around that, and that is where the conversation about elevating the U.S. Fire Administration, that public safety voice, to better coordinate the training, recruitment, retention, in the local government workforce, recognizing that that volunteer component is critical to the success across the entire country.
Excellent. Thank you. Director McCombs?
Do you have me now?
Yeah,
Got it.
thank you.
Victory. I'm sure you're all very excited. My microphone's working. So Mike and Dan, I just want to appreciate both of you for not only, I just want folks to understand, like, this was an insanely huge commitment of their time and efforts. And you know, I've been talking with my counterpart, Casey, in Nevada, and she just reflected on how much time was invested and yet how proud they were of the work that they did. And I just want folks to know that we're already in, you know, a lot of conversations with the delegation folks, as well as the National Association of State Foresters are also starting to build out a platform. And there's a lot of real good nuggets in there that they covered that are good for Colorado, around wood utilization, reforestation, and nurseries, a variety of things. So I think this committee should potentially try to come back to this work. And what we can provide is more consolidated information, so you're not like trying to consume a multi-100-page report and literally dozens and dozens and dozens of recommendations, but zeroing in on places where the Forest Health Advisory Council could be really helpful in moving forward both state policy, but also I don't think there's anything in the statute that precludes us from advocating to our federal legislators as well. So it's just something to be thoughtful of, and I commit to supporting Dan and Mike in providing some of our recommendations that kind of consolidate through the state foresters, intergovernmental associations. And then I think it's fantastic that, you know, we had representation from Denver Water, and you know, the Colorado voice was so strong because we're doing so many amazing things. So just wanted to say thanks again, Mike, for your service, and to Dan and to Madeline as well. Like it was no small thing to do that work. So, and because you guys know how crazy they are normally without huge federal commitment, time commitment. So it was a big deal, and I just really appreciate it. The report is actually extremely impactful, and I'm impressed with how much policy, momentum, and initiative is coming from it. So pretty rad. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Director McCombs. I think you meant to say they're not crazy, but crazy schedules. So, yeah. But,
That's crazy.
He probably did that.
In a good way.
He knows me well, so.
well, I echo that. I mean, I just can't, I'm just really proud of our leadership that did this, and I can't imagine just the amount of collaboration and work just to try to wrangle a national voice. So I really want to thank that. I just want to do a time check with you, Director Morgan, because I know you needed to go. And like I said, our committee could bring some questions. And I do think Director McComb's suggestion of kind of helping us filter down what we can kind of advocate for. And then that might be a question for our the Forest Health Council staff. I don't know where the policy or the legislative committee, but I mentioned advocating. Maybe that's something we should look at. So, supporting some of these things. So what's your time today? Because I know we have a couple other things to do today too.
I've got a couple more. If there's any other questions, or if you guys, I think it would be good as you said, Commissioner, and as Director McComb said, we can't let this work lie. And there are things we can do. There's things we're doing locally, but I think there's more that we can be done from a policy perspective. And I will leave it with this comment as maybe what I will call it a reality check for me. And for those of you that don't know, I grew up on a ranch in Garfield County. So I'm all about local control and all of those things, and I 100% support that. What we need to be aware of right now, if you look at what's happening specifically, well, we're seeing it happen in Colorado, in probably some in Laramie County, some in Boulder, some in Jefferson. We're going to see that expand a little bit more. In California, I believe it's 4 of the 5 largest insurers have said we're not going to write any more policies, or we're walking away. And so when we think about what we're doing holistically about our mitigation efforts, and when I say mitigation, I mean lessening the likelihood or severity of an event when it occurs, which includes the fuel management, the hardening of structures and communities, our response capabilities, all those things. When we think about that, if we don't take it serious, we need to change the trajectory of where we're going, or if we're not far away from in Colorado being, you won't be able to get insurance. And if you can't get insurance, the lenders aren't going to give you money to buy, to build a home. So we have some huge policy things that we have to be thinking about, that this is not necessarily about government regulation. This is about changing the trajectory of where we're headed to a policy level to keep insurability and affordability. Because again, if you step back and look at it, when we think of insurance of last resort, I don't think that the government really should be in the insurance business, because the private industry has stepped away. So I think we have some hard conversations to have, and this report reflects on some of that. So I would encourage us to all kind of open our minds a little bit to what it's going to take to make a big impact over the long run, again, with a 50-year strategy. So I apologize for the soapbox at the end, but I wanted to share that with you guys, and thank you for your time, and answer any questions if you have them, or let you get to business.
Again, we thank you for your work and service to Colorado and on the national level, and we appreciate all these insights and trying to help us digest this large but very critical, important report. If there's a burning question, does anyone want to raise their hand? Otherwise, I think it would be great just to submit your questions to Courtney, and then we can have, if they have time, hopefully, and respecting the holidays, get those to them. And I think it's a great suggestion from, again, Director McComb's kind of helping us filter what would really be impactful for us to focus on. So anybody have burning questions? If not, we'll let Director Morgan get back to his busy Friday.
Well, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, everybody. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and we really appreciate you being here.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay. Wow, that was a lot. Some pretty cool stuff. So I think we're not done talking about that. So I think we'll be continuing this conversation, but let's get into the rest of our agenda, because we have about 10 minutes and I want to honor our agenda time. And so let's move on to, excuse me, kind of the next item, which would be some, just a quick update about the legislative question of funding a budget for the Colorado Forest Health Council. Any updates on that, Courtney?
Commissioner, the update is a little bit disappointing. No real updates. There's still conversations going on internally about the budget and how to support the budget moving forward. So I can just make a note that whenever there's more information to share, I will share. And until then, it's just sort of ongoing internal conversations.
Okay, that's helpful. So we'll just kind of wait till you say there's some things for us to talk about. So then I thought we'd talk about the next updates because we're heading into the holidays and then the legislative session is going to kick off with a bang. And we're not having a meeting on December 29th to honor everyone's time, and happy anniversary again to Mr. and Mrs. Morgan for their 50th wedding anniversary. So, and I'll be celebrating my 30th, so it's a pretty exciting day, I think. So I just want to just have an update from James or Courtney on the latest from the legislation. I know there's some work also happening with the WUI Code Board bill that I might have a conversation with next week. So does James or Courtney have some updates on legislation or some of the recommendations from the Wildfire Interim Committee?
Nothing much has changed on our end. As far as we know, we're just waiting for those actual bills to get introduced on day one and kind of work through them. Myself, Daphne, and Joel from DPS had a very brief conversation with Senator Cutter to talk about the bills that she had introduced into the interim committee to see if there were any concerns. And we said, no, we're going to work with her on the 3 bills that she's specifically not worried about, but working on. Her biochar bill we're going to help with, the slash bill we're going to help with. And then in the process of talking, she brought up her standardization bill, and she's saying that she hopes we can continue having conversations about that moving into the future. But other than that, there's really no major updates on those interim bills. The biggest kind of update that I think I had last time I had talked to you guys about Senate Bill 5, the Commission on Higher Education had started the process of kind of divvying out some of that money. The CSFS provided our statutorily required feedback into that, and I know that they went to the commission and they asked for full funding for all of those projects. And I'm waiting to hear back how the commission kind of accepted that. But as far as I know, I'm planning on hearing a yes that they're moving forward on all of those projects because the money that was appropriated, there's enough for all 7 of those schools to kind of move forward.
Do we know if Front Range was one of those schools?
If we can, I guess this is going to be public. I know that Front Range was one of those, and it's one of those that we said, yes, we want to fund that. Well, not we, but that money should fund it.
Excellent. Mr. Morgan.
I was at Front Range's advisory board meeting this week, and they're taking it and running with it. They're assuming that that's going to come through, and they're already working on their program and working on their hires. And Jennifer Lee and Heather Danhauer are definitely, they appreciate it very much, and they have a program and everything in place, and they're very excited about it. And they want to thank everybody here for all your efforts on making this happen.
Great to hear. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Director McCombs, I saw you come back on camera. Did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I just got back from plugging in our crock pot that my wife reminded me I was supposed to do at 9 o'clock.
Okay, now I understand the message. Any other questions about that? Okay. Well, oh, Courtney.
I have something slightly off topic. It's not in relation to Senate Bill 5. It was sort of another update on ways that the council can perhaps advocate for its priorities. This was a question you all asked last time, so I just wanted to make sure to answer that before the end of the meeting.
Thank you. Well, let's just see if anyone else has any questions or updates from James. One question I have, James, is there any way for any stakeholdering, or I don't know, we haven't voted on it, but I certainly, since one of those was some of the, one of the suggestions I had, the slash dates or whatever, any way for us to be part of the stakeholdering or, you know, those conversations, or what does that look like?
Let me follow up with, sorry, just got a text message. Let me follow up with Senator Cutter. I'm sure she's going to be more than inclined to let these stakeholders kind of into that discussion. The bill seems pretty set, but if there's things that need to happen, I'll see what the process she would like for me to kind of ask you guys to start to re-engage.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, no other questions? Courtney, what would you like to add to the report outs?
Yes. So at the last meeting, you had all asked, are there any other ways, because not all of the priorities were picked up by the interim committee, is there any other ways to sort of advocate for those? And I spoke with the legislative director at DNR, and she said there really are the only two avenues that are outlined in statute, which is one, sending the annual report to the governor's office, which we've done, and then two, reporting out to the Wildfire Matters Interim Committee. So we've, fully stepped into both of those avenues, and that's all that's available to us right now. We did talk about how the committee has sort of shifted its timeline so that it can also provide recommendations directly to the departments. So that's sort of, a third avenue for sharing its recommendations. So I think we're really, doing everything that we have, we're using all the tools that we have to share our expertise.
Great. Well, that's great to have that answer, and I appreciate that. And I'm glad that some of our planning and setting up a structure has given us a third avenue to kind of engage. So that's great news. Since we're almost out of time, any other burning questions? Otherwise, I just want to update everybody, make sure we all know about, we're canceling the December 29th meeting, and then we'll be meeting on, I believe, December, is it the 12th, Courtney? Will be our next meeting. So you have some time to read that report or think about some things. And we just really appreciate Director Gibbs and Director Morgan being here. Oh, January 12th. Yep. Okay. So any burning questions? Any comments other than happy holidays to everyone and just thankful for all the work we've done this year. You guys are amazing. And I think that we have accomplished a lot, and I'm grateful for each and every one of you and this partnership and collaboration. And I wish you all the very best. And thank you everyone else who joined us today. Really a great meeting, and appreciate you being here today. Any other comments?
Just thank you to you, Chair Shattuck McNally.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It's been my honor and pleasure. I love this work. So I just kind of say, I feel very lucky. So I feel kind of pinch myself. Yay, I get to work on this. This is amazing. Well, with that, would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'd so move.
The second. Thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Great. And just thank you to Courtney, James, Director McCombs, and everyone who supports this committee. We're grateful for you and your work, and we wish you all the best. Thank you. Take care, everyone. See you next year.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.